who's running a few minutes late. My name's Branham Gingelbach. I'm the president of the Maury County Chamber and Economic Alliance. We're hosting the event tonight. The purpose of the event here tonight is to learn more about this Metro Charter that everyone's been hearing and reading about, and what these people with this commission have been doing for the last 7 months. I want to thank Trent Ogilvie, who's on our advocacy committee at the Chamber. At the Chamber, we're not supporting or not supporting the, is that right? It's been a long day. Anyway, we're not taking a position. How about that? Is that the easier? On the Metro Charter, but we are about taking a position and educating our membership and educating our community on issues that affect you. So that's the real purpose of tonight, is this forum, is to educate all of us, to learn more about what's going on, so that you all are in a position to make the decision that you so choose come February. So that's what it's about tonight. We have Chairman Bill Gettner of the Metro Charter Commission, who's going to be presenting tonight, along with Randy Hardison. I believe they're going to present for about 20-25 minutes or so, and then allow time for some Q&A. Thank you so much for being here tonight. If you have questions or feedback about this event at all, please let us know. Yes. Sure, I'm going to let Chairman Gettner, I think he's going to do that as part of his remarks. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Brandon. A little bit of history. When you look at when this state was formed, one of the things that the legislature wanted, it's okay. One of the things that the legislature wanted to do was to control how people govern themselves throughout the state of Tennessee. Basically what I'm saying is, we can't just simply tonight say we want to be a city manager form of government or a county commission form of government. All of that has to go through the state legislature. Now let's fast forward with that little bit of information to 2010. In 2010, a group of Maury County people decided it was time to seek a petition process. And what these individuals did was spend most of that year going around and asking people to sign a petition. And that petition basically called for a referendum on the idea of holding a ballot question for all of you who are registered voters here to consider going from a city government and a county government to a metropolitan form of government. When this process got started and the group turned in their petition, the Maury County Election Commission had to certify that there were sufficient voters who had signed that petition. Once they determined that this group had in fact reached that particular goal, then they informed both the county mayor and the city mayor that the requirements that are stated in the Tennessee Code Annotated 7-1-101 needed to be implemented within a very specific time schedule. So on January the 12th of this year, County Mayor Bailey introduced 10 representatives that were going to represent the county, and Mayor Dean Dickey represented the city, presented 5 members for a total of 15 members who would sit as a body and attempt to come up with a charter for you as voters to consider. One of the things we did immediately after the first meeting of January the 12th was to look at those charters that are currently in place here in Maury, or in the state. We also spent time looking at charters in other counties that attempted to get it passed but failed. We also talked with the Tennessee Advisory Commission on Intergovernmental Relations, as well as a number of communities outside of Tennessee that have a metropolitan form of government. In March and April of this year, we conducted 4 public hearings. And the purpose for those public hearings was to discuss ideas and recommendations of what ought to be put in this particular document. In June of this year, the Election Commission recognized that if we turned that charter in based on that statute, they would have to be a special called election, that they couldn't line it up with the presidential primary. And that was the key, I think, for the folks that were out seeking petitions, was not to cost you and I additional dollars to have a special election, but to link it up with the presidential primaries that will be held on March 6th of next year. The 2 governments approved an extension of time, and now the Charter Commission has until mid-December to complete its work. On October the 1st, we completed our draft. And we felt that it was important that we come back to you and seek from you ideas on how to improve it, what things we need to take out, what things we need to add in, etc. So the purpose for our meeting tonight is to do just that. There will be other meetings in which we can debate the idea of a metro government versus a city manager form of government versus a metropolitan form of government. But tonight what we're looking for are any suggested changes. The Charter Commission will again meet on November the 17th and December the 1st to finalize this document. And on December 8th, the Commission will hand deliver to the 3 cities, the county government, and to the Board of Elections our final charter. That ends the responsibilities of the Charter Commission. And at this time, I would like to introduce the members of the Charter Commission are here, and I'd like for each of them to stand. I'm going to start over here with Trent. Trent, if you'll introduce yourself, and then we'll go on back up and down this way.
Trent Ogilvy. John Hatcher.
David Edwards.
Ron Johnson.
Jimmy Couch.
Ashley Brown.
Doug Williamson. Maury.
Several of the commission members aren't here, but just to give you their names: Barbara Dobbins, Tim Dodd, Jerry Irwin, Roger Gillum. We were also very fortunate to have some key people helping us on the staff side, and Katie McKeel, who's in the back, has been our go-to person in terms of writing this document, and we certainly appreciate her. Dennis Huffer is not here this evening. He has 34 years of experience with dealing with local governments as an attorney. Unfortunately, he could not be here as well. There is one other person that I want to recognize, and that is Mr. Glenn Hassig. Glenn was a key person in the process of seeking the petition, and he was appointed to the Charter Commission by Mayor Bailey. From my point of view, I thought Glenn brought a very unique perspective to the whole concept of looking at metro government. Unfortunately, he passed away. The Charter Commission adopted a resolution that said that the work that we are doing and that we will turn in on December 8th will be in memory of Mr. Hassig for the work that he had done. At this time, I'd like to introduce Randy Hardison, who is the vice chairperson, who has a slide presentation. Following his presentation, I'm going to do about a 25-minute real rush through the entire document. And after that, we will have some microphones for those down here and those up there to ask questions. And if I can't answer it, I've got Trent, John, Stephen, and Doug, and all the others who can help us make that informed process and move forward. With that, I will now turn it over to Randy.
Hello. Oh yeah. High tech. Bill told me to finish up in about 10 minutes or less, and telling a lawyer to be brief is kind of a dumb thing, but I will try. I'm just going to do a little brief overview of sort of Metropolitan and how it applies to us, whether you know me or not, because I didn't introduce myself a minute ago. I'm Randy Hardison, an attorney in Columbia, and I'm 7th generation Maury County. And this whole process of change I've taken very seriously, and I hope you all have some questions about how this works, and we'll be here. As Bill mentioned, there were 15 of us that volunteered to work on this project. And you have to remember, and I think I speak for all 15 members, we pretty much started this process not because we were in favor of metropolitan government. Because the petition had been submitted, there would be a vote on a metropolitan government. That's just the law. Our job was not necessarily to decide whether we were in favor of it or not in favor of it, and we tried to keep an open mind from the very beginning. But that since it was going to be voted on, our mission was to try to develop the best form, the best charter, our own local constitution, as we could possibly come up with. So that what was presented, if it's voted in, we did the best to our community that we could do. And with this draft, I'm very proud of the group of people that I've been associated with. They've worked very, very hard getting us to this point. Now, after almost 9 months of research, discussion, drafting, redrafting again, we have what hopefully you all have received a copy of. It's also available on our website. What will happen is that we, as I said, once the petition was submitted, we had to develop this charter. And this is what we have finished after 9 months of great deliberation by a very good group of people. If more than 50% in the county and more than 50% in the city, when they go to the poll, there's just one little line item. Do you want to go metropolitan government? Yes, no. If one more than 50% says yes in the county and one more in the city says yes, then we change. And that's where we are. And that form of metropolitan government will be determined by this charter or this constitution that we're presenting and that we've worked so hard on for 9 months. And Bill will talk a little bit more about some of the details, and I'm just giving a broad overview. But if more people say click yes than no, then next November there's going to be an election and to the new metropolitan government, and that new government takes effect January of 2013. And of course most of next year will be working on the transition between old and new. And that's what ends up being at stake come next year. So what exactly is metropolitan government as it applies to us? Most of you are familiar with metropolitan Nashville. Some of you may have heard that Trousdale County went metro, that Moore County went metro. There are a number of other counties that have looked at it. Most recently, Chattanooga's looked at it, turned it down. And often the question has been asked of us, if it's a good thing, bad thing, why haven't more people done it? I think those of us here that make up the 15 after 9 months have realized it's a tough task to start all over again. And that's what we're being asked to do, and that's what a metropolitan government is. You take, in our case, our two local governments of Maury County and the city of Columbia. Point of reference here. Spring Hill, the Maury County side, and Mount Pleasant are not included in what would become metropolitan government. They had the option to be involved. They did not. So this is Maury County and Columbia. Now Spring Hill, the Maury County side, and Mount Pleasant are in Maury County and would be voting on this, but we would not be absorbing or merging or consolidating in any way that affects the city of Mount Pleasant or the city of Spring Hill. This comes another one of our 15, Tim Dodd. So this is those two governments is what the yes and no vote will be all about. And what happens is we vote yes, we will create a brand new political governmental entity. The metropolitan government of Maury County and Columbia, Tennessee. And the county government and the city government are merged or consolidated into this one new government, which will be our local government. There's three key characteristics to a metropolitan government that are a little different from what we're accustomed to with Maury County and City of Columbia. When you've combined the two things together, you have an urban services area. New PowerPoint. I have to keep looking to make sure it's saying what it's supposed to. You have an urban services area of the metropolitan government, which is what used to be the City of Columbia city limits. The services remain the same, it's just administered by a new centralized metro government. You also have a general services district, which is all of Maury County, that's not inside what used to be the City of Columbia. That's within the county, and that includes Spring Hill, Mount Pleasant, and Columbia. The services provided to that area stay the same, it's just administered by a new centralized consolidated government. You also have, with our school system, a conversion to a metro school system. We don't have to worry about unification of multiple school systems like other counties would have to, because we'd already done that. We already have a consolidated school system, and it would become part of the metropolitan government. It would become the metropolitan school system, which for all practical purposes should continue to work the same way that it has worked before. The powers of a metro government are not that different from Maury County and Columbia. It's just that now they're all rolled up into one. You don't have city hall, you don't have county courthouse. It's all one combined government, one metropolitan government that's administered. You know, all of the ordinances and laws under the city now and under the county still exist. They are just rolled up into the new metropolitan government. And a couple of features I did want to point out. You do have an option when you're doing this. Not all metropolitan charters are the same. We chose some things out of Nashville and other places that we liked, and there are some things in those that we didn't like. And a lot of that was based on recommendations of people that we talked to. Within government now, people that we talked to at our public hearings. What did everybody think would work best for us here? And a lot of that's been incorporated. One thing we had to consider was whether to retain what's called constitutional officers. You're familiar with them: the county court clerk, the trustee, the tax assessor, Mr. Khan. who did I leave out? The sheriff, register of deeds. We've chosen in the charter to retain those as constitutional officers under the metropolitan government. So that part of it won't change. They'll still be there, they'll still be elected. Steve will still be collecting our money, John Fleming will still be collecting the register of deeds, the information. Jim Dooley will still be handling all of our appraisals. We chose to retain all of that under the metropolitan government. We also decided to create a chief executive officer or a mayor, trying to emulate basically the three-way division that most of our governments are put at. We have a president, Congress, and a judiciary at the state level. We have a governor and a legislature and the judiciary. We've done the same thing with this charter or constitution for the metropolitan government. We have a chief executive officer, which is a mayor, which is elected, and not sitting on the council, but head of all executive functions, departments, et cetera, for the metropolitan government. You won't have a county mayor anymore or a city mayor, you'll have a metropolitan mayor. You'd also have a metropolitan council. That would be the chief legislative body. That's going to replace the city council, it's going to replace the county commission, it'll have a new. And it's the metropolitan council, and again, we'll elect all of these people to those positions, as we have all done. In this particular charter, after much debate, research, as you'll see later, we have come up with an 11-person metropolitan council. See, Bill, I promised I'd keep it short. The bottom line is, on March the 6th of next year, everybody in Maury County is going to have an opportunity to vote. And on the ballot will be this question. Should we leave things the same, or should we go metropolitan? Yes, no. And as I said, I'm very proud of the work that this group has done, because if we decide to go yes, I think we have a great charter to build on. We've tried not to take sides on metro or not metro. That's up to the people of Maury County. But if we decide to go that way, I think we've got a great thing to start with. See? I kept it short.
I'm going to turn that off.
Yeah, you need to just go back to the beginning.
I'll let you handle that. One of the things that we asked everyone on this charter commission, as well as staff, is let's keep it simple in terms of the English language. We've also wanted to keep it short. If you look at other charters out there, quite honestly, this charter is a lot shorter than some that you may have seen or in the future see. The other thing is we asked to keep the legalese down as much as possible. We only have one word, it's contumacious. It's a 4-syllable word. Quite honestly, I had no idea what it meant. My guess is some of you don't, but that's the only legal word that is in this document. And it's in this document because if a member of the Metro Council misbehaves, apparently that is the word that the courts and others in the court system use as a means to deal with that particular issue. So hopefully what you have read here this evening as you scan through and what we'll be going through in a minute, it's all fairly plain English. We started this charter off with the idea of a preamble, and John Hatcher and Dennis Huffer worked together, and I think pretty well summarizes what the 15 of us were attempting to do. I'm going to skip Article 1 because it's basically, we've already talked about it. We know what type of consolidation, the territory, etc. So I'm going to start on Article 2 on page 2, and that's the Legislative Metropolitan Council. The legislative authority, the council has one member elected from each council district. The candidate from each district receiving the largest number of votes is elected. As Randy's indicated, the initial boundaries and district numbers of the Metropolitan Council districts are the same as those of the election of the county commissioners of Maury County in existence as of effective date of this charter. Terms and qualifications. Each member of the Metropolitan Council serves for a term of 4 years. To qualify to run for the council, the individual must be a resident as defined by the state law of the district from which he or she seeks elections, must be at least 21 years of age, must have been a resident of the area of the metropolitan government and district from which he or she seeks election for at least 1 year before the date of election. If that member leaves that district, then a vacancy occurs. The council members will initially be paid based upon population classification in accordance with state law. The council by ordinance may modify the pay for its members, but no alteration in pay may take effect on any council member until the next term. The council members must be in attendance to receive pay. The vice mayor. At the first meeting after each election, the council will elect one of its members to be the vice mayor. He or she will serve for 2 years. At the end of that 2-year term, council will reconsider. The existing vice mayor may very well be reelected, but that could also change. The vice mayor has the right to vote on all matters that are in front of the council, and the vice mayor's pay is the same as those of other council members. A majority of the authorized members of council constitute a quorum to transact business. Regular and special meetings. The Metropolitan Council must hold at least 2 regular meetings each calendar month. Special meetings of the council can be called by the Metro Mayor. If the mayor is not available, then the vice mayor can do it. If a quorum of the council wishes to call a special call meeting, that process can also call and create a special meeting. The powers and authority of the council may legislate with respect to the power of the metropolitan government granted by this charter except as otherwise provided. An ordinance must be approved on 2 separate considerations at regular meetings to be effective. The council may adopt resolutions, however, on a single consideration at any meeting. If the mayor vetoes the ordinance or resolution, the veto may be overturned by 2/3 of the authorized membership of the council. There is no pension or benefits for those who serve on council. The vacancies on council will be filled by the majority of the remaining council members present and voting. Article 3, Metro Mayor. One of the things that we heard was a desire to have someone leading this that had all of the powers that would be required to run a government, so that that voter could either continue to support that person or not support it. And so I'm going to go through very quickly the 13 requirements that this Metro Mayor must follow. Must supervise all executive departments and boards created or authorized by this charter unless otherwise specifically provided. That may also be delegated to the assistant to the mayor. Number 2, must in cooperation with the assistant to the mayor and director of finance submit timely budgets to the Metropolitan Council for consideration and approval. 3, must oversee the authorization and accounting metropolitan government disbursements. This can also be given as a delegated authority to the assistant to the mayor. 4, may call special meetings of the Metropolitan Council. 5, must execute all contracts and obligations. 6, must appoint subject to approval of a majority of the Metropolitan Council present and voting, and may remove any department director not under civil service. This provision does not apply to constitutional officers. 7, may attend any meeting of the Metropolitan Council or any board or commission and make recommendations. 8, may require any department, board, or commission to submit written reports in connection with the affairs of the metropolitan government to the Metropolitan Council. This is another one that can be given to the assistant to the mayor. 9, must give the Metropolitan Council a report on the financial and general welfare of the government each year in January. 10, must appoint members of boards and commissions created or authorized by this charter, subject to the approval of the majority of the Metropolitan Council, president, and voting. Vacancies are to be filled for the unexpired term of the same manner. 11, must submit reports and recommendations to the Metropolitan Council upon request and when the mayor deems it appropriate. 12, must supervise any authorized capital improvement project. This is another one that the assistant to the mayor can handle. And 13, must be responsible for hiring, disciplining, and terminating employees of the metropolitan government. That also can be delegated by the mayor to the assistant mayor. Qualifications to run for metro mayor. To qualify as a candidate for the metropolitan mayor, an individual must be at least 25 years of age, must reside in the area of the metropolitan government for at least 3 consecutive years immediately before the deadline for filing as a candidate. The mayor may serve only 3 consecutive 4-year terms, but may qualify and be elected again after an intervening period. That is the only elected official that we put a term limit on. The Metropolitan Council sets and modifies the salary of the mayor, but the salary may not be less than the established by general law for a county mayor or the same population class as the metropolitan government. We talked about powers. One of the other powers that the mayor has is that he can approve ordinances as adopted by council by signing or vetoing it. And as I said, and Randy also, that if the mayor does not sign or veto the ordinance within 10 days, minus federal holidays, Saturdays and Sundays, etc., then it becomes law according to the terms. If the mayor does decide to veto it, then that starts that other process that I shared with you. Now, we're going to go to Article 4 in the executive departments and boards. When we originally started this whole process, a lot of us were thinking about situations where you have a city manager form of government, which that individual basically handles all the departments, reports to the council, etc. But the more we thought about this and more what we heard from you, in that you wanted your chief executive officer to be answerable to you, the voters. We felt that that individual, regardless of his or her expertise, is going to need to have someone sitting fairly close to him or her and helping him or her manage this government. And so the assistant to the mayor is a very critical position, but we also put in qualifications. So it's not going to be the campaign manager, if you will, for the metro mayor. What we're looking for is somebody who has skill sets in city administration, public administration, business, etc. And in that particular case, I want to read what we've put here, and this is on page 5 under 4.01. The mayor must appoint an assistant to the mayor who is subject to confirmation by the majority of the Metropolitan Council present and voting. The assistant to the mayor must reside in the area of the metropolitan government during the period of employment. The assistant to the mayor must have at least a bachelor's degree in city or county management, public administration, business administration, or similar educational qualifications satisfactory to the metropolitan mayor and council. The Metropolitan Council may enact additional qualifications by ordinance. The assistant to the mayor serves at the will of the mayor and carries out those duties delegated to the mayor. So I think that some of us who were concerned that somebody stepping into the shoes of a mayor and not having that experience, to have this type of person sitting beside you would hopefully help that process. The other thing that we did under this is we gave the Metro Council the ability to decide not to perhaps create a new department for whatever might come up in the future. So what this Metro Council has the ability to do is to actually go to the private business side and say, will you handle this particular service that has come up that we need to begin to enforce, as opposed to going to one of the departments that I'm going to go through in just a minute. So I think that's a rather unique thing that you don't quite see in other charters, but I think we recognize that the whole scheme of government is changing, and this might very well be a very good thing to have in our government. In terms of the departments, we have a Department of Finance, a Department of Human Resources, an internal audit, and the interesting thing on the internal audit that we added is that once a year, that auditor presents to the Metro Council and to the mayor a list of cost reductions to improve the efficiency of government. That was one of the things we kept hearing, is that you wanted to see a very efficient government. Well, here's part of that process that is required every year, that the auditor present that type of information to those on the Metro Council as well as to you out as voters. We've got a Department of Recreation and Parks, Department of Planning, Engineering and Codes, Department of Public Safety, Department of Public Works, Department of Information Services, Department of Tourism, Department of Veteran Services, Department of Historical Archives. In terms of the library, the only thing that will change is the name of our library. In terms of water and power, the Columbia Power and Water System will continue as the Metropolitan Government of Columbia and Maury County Power and Water System. We also put in here that within 3 years after this is up and running, that there would be a consolidation with the Maury County Water System. The Election Commission basically remains the same. There is the opportunity for both the mayor and council to have an attorney, and the confirmation by the majority of the Metropolitan Council president voting must appoint an attorney or attorneys to handle the legal work of the metropolitan government. Randy covered with you just a few minutes ago about the service districts. The one he left out, and I understand why he did, is special districts. And whether you're in Tennessee or in other states, you will see that type of situation. Let me give you an example of what I mean by special districts. Culleoka has a fire department. The people in Culleoka may decide, by gosh, we want a full-time fire department in our community. They can petition the Metro Council, and if they're successful, then that becomes a special district as it relates to fire services. And it will be reflected in the budget as a budget line item dealing with special districts. So there are those occasions when it's appropriate to consider that. That will be probably driven by the people in that particular area for whatever service that they're interested in. But that is something that is in this charter. Article 6 talks about something called an urban council. That is a 3-member council whose sole function is to establish a mandatory obligation to levy an ad valorem tax adequate with other available funds to finance the budget of the urban services as determined by the Metro Council. Those 3 members who serve on that will be the top 3 vote-getting council members within that urban service district, and they serve for 2 years. Article 7 talks about the budget and financial matters. If you look at your charter, you see that runs for about almost 4 pages. But basically, very quickly, the fiscal year of the metropolitan government begins on January 1 and ends on June 30th. The annual operating budget, there will be a specific section that deals with the general service district. There will be another section that deals with the urban service district, and then for a special service district if that occurs. In no event may the total proposed expenditures from any funds exceed the total anticipated revenues plus the estimated unappropriated surplus or fund balance plus applicable reserves, but less any estimated deficit at the end of the year. For reserve purposes, all monies and reserves of the City of Columbia immediately before the effective date of this charter become reserves in the urban service district, and all monies in reserve in the in the Maury County immediately before the effective date of this charter become the reserve for the general services district. The mayor must review the operating budget submitted to him or her by the finance director and to make final revisions before it is sent to council. But no later than May 1st, the mayor must submit to the Metropolitan Council his proposed budget or her budget, along with a budget message that explains what is involved here. The council must adopt the operating budget for the ensuing fiscal year no later than June 30th. If they don't, and we've had this experience happen in this county where the school system and the Metro Council have issues that come up, very legitimate issues. What we have done in this charter is say that if council and the school board cannot come to terms with each other, then the mayor's budget that he or she submits becomes the budget for the metropolitan government until a council makes any additional adoptions or deletions from whatever continuing process or budget matters that they want. That, I think, will hopefully spur the direction of this Metropolitan Council and the school board to understand that they need to come together fairly quickly and hopefully resolve whatever differences so that we all can move forward. The capital improvement budget, again, it's broken down in the general services area, the urban services area, and if there are any special services areas as well. Under Article 8, the metropolitan government debt, the urban service district will be responsible for the debt issued for the benefit of the urban services district. The general service district will be responsible for the debt issued for the benefit of the general service district, and each special service district will be responsible for debt issued for the benefit of that district. Article 9 gets into the education. The cost of public aid of education will be assigned to the general services district. The school board will be composed of one member elected from each of the districts that are in our government, which would be 11. There's a list of responsibilities under subparagraph 1. I won't bother to go over that with you, but those are proper and very appropriate. The one thing that we did struggle with was under paragraph 1, and that is where it says the school board shall, in accordance to state law, do all things necessary and proper to operate an efficient and accredited school system that is in compliance with state and federal standards. Now that sounds like a fairly simple statement, but as Mr. Worley will point out to you, there are issues that need to be addressed, and I think that what we've come up with is probably the best for our circumstances that we find here. Got a page out of line there, just a second. Randy, you didn't look at this, did you, and get me all out of shape here, did you? Here we go. Let's talk about the qualifications, terms, and compensation for school board members. Each candidate For the school board membership, must be qualified to vote, must be at least 21 years of age, and must have been a resident of the area of the metropolitan government and the district from which he or she seeks election for at least 1 year before the date of election. The term of office is 4 years. Compensation for board members is equal to that of those on council. Section 9.03 says that no member of the school board may also be an employee of the school system. If a school employee does decide to run and is elected, he or she must resign as an employee before assuming that office. Tenure and benefit rights of teachers and other employees will be retained. Constitutional officers, as Randy's indicated, we did not change any of that. The one thing we did do as it relates to the sheriff, and that was a huge contention with how we were going to approach the sheriff or the chief of police. At the end of the day, we felt that the sheriff was perhaps in a much better position to handle that type of responsibility, and so the sheriff will be the person who handles all of the law enforcement in the metropolitan area, which includes Maury County and the what is currently the city of Columbia. Trustees, no change there. Judiciary system, really no change. The one thing that you might want to take a look at is on page 16 under section 1103. And that involves the city judge and the city court clerk. One of the things that when we met with the judges, we shared with them what our city judge does and so forth. And our question to them was, is this something you can assume, or do we need to have an administrative judge who would handle the types of duties that the current city judge is doing? When the dust settled on that question, it was evident that we needed to go ahead and say that all of those will eventually be assumed by the government or by the judicial system, and there would be no city judge. But there are some provisions in there that allow for that process to terminate itself over a short period of time. But that's probably the one thing that is a little bit different. Now, section 1104 keeps all of those criminal court clerks, clerk and masters, and judicial commissioners continue and will continue to operate as provided under existing law. One of the things that we heard an awful lot about was ethics. And I understand that can be rather difficult for a lot of folks, but what we kept hearing at those public meetings was, we want an ethics policy in place for this metro government if we're going to vote on it. And so we came up with a number of suggestions. Holding other positions, no member of any board, commission, or authority or any employee of the metropolitan government may hold any other remunerative office or position in the metropolitan government. No elected or appointed official of any local government outside the metropolitan government may hold any elected or appointed office in the metropolitan government except with the approval of the Metropolitan Council. Soliciting for campaigns, basically, you just don't do that while you're on duty or in front of the courthouse. Firms doing business with the government. A member of the Metropolitan Council, the Metropolitan Mayor, the Metropolitan School Board member, or any other metropolitan government official who is employed by a firm that enters into a contract with the metropolitan government may not continue employment with the firm while the firm is doing business with the metropolitan government. Employees who do not hold elective office, no metropolitan employee or general government employee or employees of boards, commissions, or authorities may hold an elected position within the metropolitan government. And the nepotism policy is pretty straightforward, and I won't bother to get into that. On page 17 is our 4-syllable word, And basically what it talks about is that is a word that you've got to have in order if you need to prosecute a member of the Metropolitan Council for various misconducts. Going on into retirements and pensions, Article 13. The council may establish a new retirement and pension plan. All benefits payable to members, retired members, and their spouse and their survivors in accordance with any of the retirement plans of the former City of Columbia or Maury County as the plans existed before the effective date of this charter will continue unimpaired for the same duration provided in those plans as they existed before the effective date, and those benefits are an obligation and liability of the metropolitan government. The next section, 1302, existing employees, pensions and retirement systems of the City of Columbia and Maury County, if any, on the effective date of this charter are recognized and continued. The last paragraph there talks about a civil service system that I think most of us are familiar with. Article 14 was rather unique, and quite honestly, if you look at other charters, you will not see this type of an article. But what we've done is, through the help of Brandon and his group, we have Maury Alliance, the Metro Council, the Industrial Development Board, and the Columbia Housing and Redevelopment Corporation. This group constitutes what we feel, and if you look under section 1401, you can read the reasons why we've got it in here. But this group will annually meet with the mayor, and together they will make a suggested economic development plan, a 4-year plan, and present that to the Metro Council. The council then has a period of time in which they must also sign off on this plan so that you and I as residents understand where these agencies and governments are going to go relative to economic development. I think it is a great addition, and my guess is that you will find future charters across the state and even outside of the state, including something like this. Article 15 talks about authorities. Any authority, agency, board, commission, or committee existing either independently or under the City of Columbia or Maury County is recognized and continue as the agency of the metropolitan government. It will have the same relationship to the metropolitan government as it previously had in the City of Columbia or Maury County. The names of each such entity will be modified to indicate their relationship to the metropolitan government. Having said that, there are two that will change, and that's the Planning Commission and the Board of Zoning Adjustment. And that is obviously needed, and the membership will come from the Urban Service District and the General Service District. There are 3 ways in which you can amend this charter if you want. One is by ordinance, in which the metropolitan government, council, on 3 separate readings, passing on each of those, they can make a recommendation. And here again was something that we heard from your constituents, some of those of you who are elected officials, is that I want to be able to vote on whatever is going to happen. And so if a proposed amendment by ordinance is done, it will be by referendum. And so that the voters will have a chance to agree or disagree with that. So that's option 1. The public also still continues to have the ability to go through the petition process, just as we are going through here this evening, that we started back in January, where we say that the petition must be signed by a number of voters equaling 25% of those who voted in the previous countywide election, and that also is a referendum that would appear on the next year's ballot. And if the Metro Council wanted to reinstitute another, what we call Charter Revision Commission, and we can use that process to amend, but also, again, subject to a referendum. Article 17 is really kind of a little bit of the legal side that we need to have in all of our documents. The final one that I will stop deals with Article 18, the transition. 3 steps in that. The first phase will take place immediately after this charter is approved by the voters. During this phase, the transition task force created by this article will plan for the transition to a metropolitan government. Second phase takes place with the general state election in November 2012, when the election is held for the mayor and members of the Metropolitan Council. The third phase completes the transition on January 1st, 2013. The mayor and council members elected in the November election will take office as the new mayor and Metropolitan Council. The mayor and council members will serve until their replacements are elected in August 2018 and take office in 2020. We did include a provision. There was no easy way in which we could find a date when the city elected officials and the county elected officials are on the same page. So under Section 1804, those elected officials will continue to receive compensation from either the county or from the city of Columbia until the end of that particular term. The rest of it is just a little more on what the transition task force is, and that represents the 22 pages of what has taken us from January the 12th through October the 1st. At this time, I think Doug Williamson has a microphone, and Trent, you've got yours. Trent's going to handle the getting the microphone to those down here. Doug will get it up there. If you will raise your hand, Doug will hand you the mic. And what we want to do this evening, as I said at the beginning now, is what do we need to do on these 22 pages that you feel that we've left out? What do we need to include? What do we need to modify so that this group of folks on this commission can in fact get this job done and into the hands of the voters for the March 2012 consideration? Yes, sir.
First off, Article 18.08, officials of the City of Columbia and Maury County, specifically says the authority of the officials of the City of Columbia terminates and passes, but it doesn't mention Maury County. I assume that's an oversight on your part?
We'll take a look at that. I think you're probably right on that.
Because normally everything has said the City of Columbia and Maury County, or the City of Columbia or Maury County.
Yeah.
This says the authority of the officials of the City of Columbia terminates and passes to the appropriate officials, and with the exception of the bold part, it doesn't even mention Maury County government.
Okay. Thank you for that.
And then
That's
back,
good.
one other question.
Sure.
Back to the changes, where you said they could be changed 3 ways, but all 3 of them required referendum.
Correct.
Is that any change to the charter?
To the charter, yes. We're not talking ordinances now. We're saying
Well,
this.
I understand, but for instance, right now the sheriff is going to become the chief law officer.
Mm-hmm.
If they decide to change that at some time later
Yes.
and make the City of Columbia have a police chief and he be the chief officer, would that go to referendum?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did want to say, I'm Mike Bennett, I live at 1994 LaSalle Road, Spring Hill, Tennessee. I did want to say thank you to the Charter Commission. I've had the privilege and honor to sit in on several of the meetings, and I was impressed with the dialogue and discussion and the spirit of the commission. And I certainly want to thank them for all the hard work they've done over these last number of months. And you're to be commended for what I think is an outstanding document at this point. At least 90% worth. I have a couple of comments I'd like to make about it.
Sure.
In terms of improving it to somewhat. I do think it deals with a lot of the weaknesses and gaps that currently exist in our local government between the City of Columbia and the County Commission, and you've addressed those very well. The one comment I would make about might be involved with Section 12. I do not see any provision, and this deals, I think, with more empowerment of people being involved in their government or having the ability to be empowered by the provisions of the Charter. I do not see any opportunity for the voters themselves to recall an official who may be elected in there by petition. Did I miss that, or is there one in there?
Yeah, I think there is something, but go ahead, Brandon.
Actually, I'm dealing from memory, but there's state law that deals with recall. And then rather than deviate from that position for recall, we did this in many instances, we just deferred back to state law for recall petitions.
Yeah, well, there's a reference in here, I've not found it, so I would appreciate if I could find where it is. And maybe we would think about inserting that state law as being a provision for recall. I'm not aware of our ability to recall, for example, any elected official in Maury County, whether they be school board, commissioner, or a city councilman at this point. So a little clarification on how that process would take place in the charter would be helpful, I think, to citizens. The other comment I had deals with Section 16. Having been very active in the petition drive with Mr. Hasse on getting this document in before the voters, I can tell you for a fact that that 25% of the voters, and it doesn't designate registered voters, is extremely high. The hurdle for us to get 24 valid signatures of registered voters required us to get almost 3,800 signatures on the petition. So I would ask that the commission look at lowering that to 10%, which I believe is the state law in terms of what was provided for, that you referenced earlier, Mr. Hardison, in that process. And it's talking about the number of voters. It doesn't say registered voters in terms of that petition, and that could be a little ambiguous for some people when they read it in terms of collecting signatures as we did. And it doesn't provide for, it calls for that percentage to be included from the preceding countywide election. And as I read this document, I think there are some staggered elections countywide with regard to either the mayor and or the charter members, and you may want to clarify that in terms of being a percentage of the election whereby the mayor was elected as opposed to the preceding countywide election, because there will be a countywide election, in my view, in this for those alternate positions, odd and even, on the Metro Council, and that may be confusing to some people. But overall, I think you're 95% there. I just would ask you to include more opportunity for the citizens themselves to participate in this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. While folks are thinking about asking questions, one of the things we've been able to do in modern technology, if you go to the web page, read the metrocharter.org, there is a link to Facebook. And we have our own Facebook page, and you can leave a question there, and the Charter Commission members will attempt to respond to those types of questions that are asked there. So that is another way of making sure that you are heard through this process. Again, we're somewhat lay citizens when it comes to working on something like this, and we need the help of everyone in this room to make it a document so that when you and others go into that voting booth, you have the best information available to make that tough decision. Any other comments? Yes, sir.
I got a question on the terms that the mayor serves.
Okay.
Where the 3 times comes from? Normally, it's,
They can't hear you in the back, Con. Sorry.
the question I have is why or where the decision come from on the mayor can serve 3 terms? It's customary to have only 2 terms. Where that came from, the 3rd term? Or there's a reason behind it?
You know, there really is, Con, and that's a great question because we did struggle with that, quite honestly. I can tell you, for a matter of fact, from this chair, and I will let other elected officials chime in if they want, that first 4 years, you're trying to figure out where first base is. It's not until that 2nd year that all of a sudden the light goes on and says, geez, I'm now mayor or I'm a council member, I need to be doing this. So that 2nd term is when he or she is really beginning to mature as an elected official and hopefully is able to guide his or her Metro Council through the process. There's a lot of things that mayors get started, but either A, are not elected, or B, have term limitations that prevent them from being able to completely finish their objective when they're in office. So we're saying 12 years. If you can't, as an elected mayor, get your agenda completed in 12 years, maybe it's time for another person coming in. At the same time, we didn't want to perpetuate a situation where you may have somebody there for a lot longer. I think it's very personally, I think I'll let the other 14 say what they wish, but I think it's very healthy to have new ideas and new changes and directions. And so it was somewhat of a compromise from 2 to 3 years. But the more we talked about it, I think most of the group felt that 3 years, or 3 terms, excuse me, 3 terms was sufficient to get whatever he or she was going to do in terms of public policy implemented. Now, is that the best? Probably not, but I think it was a good starting point for us. And if you have some other ideas on that, please let us know, because we want to study those and try to make the best decision that we can. But thank you, that's a good question.
It seems that you've done a great job, but I just had a couple questions.
Sure.
Back under the 13 authorities of the mayor, does he supervise the executive departments?
Yes.
Okay. And as such, I see no place where he evaluates them. He is, at the very last, number 13, he's responsible for the hiring, discipline, terminating of employees of the government. But I just wonder if there's an oversight as far as evaluating the departments themselves.
Well, let me respond. First of all, we did give the mayor the ability for he or she to use that assistant to the mayor to handle a lot of that. When it comes to evaluations, I think that will be an outgrowth of ordinances that the Metro Council would give consideration to. But at the same time, we're holding that mayor accountable, and if his or her departments aren't performing to the level of expectations of the public, then the public's expecting the mayor to release them from employment and bring someone else in who can in fact address whatever the public policy issue that we're dealing with. But I think down the way that is going to be something that we're going to have so that those department heads have some idea of what is expected of them, and that will come with time.
Okay, thank you. Second question, on page 16, section 12.04 concerning firms doing business with the government. We're saying that if an official is employed by a firm that enters into a contract, he may not continue employment with the firm. It seems like that we have no control over whether or not he continues employment, but we do have control over whether or not he continues as a government official. And I wonder why we stated that maybe he should no longer continue as a government official in one of those capacities, vice he shall no longer be with a firm.
Which subcommittee members dealt with that issue? Jimmy, you want to answer that?
We may need to change it. I see what you're driving at there. In other words, you're saying it ought to be, they could either resign from the office or
Right,
or
correct.
the firm. And
Correct.
I think that could be easily changed. And I don't think it was intended to be one way or the other. It's probably.
Okay, or maybe do both, or maybe give them a choice.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Okay,
think that's what we do, is give them a choice.
Okay.
That's something we ought to look at.
okay, the third question I had concerning the Maury County water system will be consolidated under the Columbia Power Metro Water District. And I just wonder, with the rural development loans and et cetera that are under the federal government, if really that agency can be taken over by some, or become a part of some other organization.
Well, that will be certainly something that the Metro Council is going to have to look at. We felt that there need to be either consolidation or be a determination. That's the reason we stretched it out to 3 years, and that's also the reason we didn't say immediately. Because you're right, there are some real tricky things in there that I don't think we as commission members are aware of, but at least now the Metro Council knows that they have 3 years to see if they can do it. At the end of 3 years, they may not be able to do it. And so therefore, it will continue as a separate system. But I think one of the things we kept hearing is, you know, you keep expanding your government and keep expanding more people to work for your government. And so we've tried in many cases to attempt consolidation where it's possible. But in this particular instance, we may not be able to do that. And that's a very, very good point to bring up. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll get you.
Part of this will be an effort to get you to educate me. But just a few comments. On page 3, where you refer to the mayor being absent from Maury County, that probably, you know, if he's down here at Lewisburg, the ball game, and there's a little fuss between him and the chairman of the commission, you know, I think it's unavailable might be added as to that, to say that he must be out of the county and unavailable. On page 7, on the Department of Planning, Engineering, and Codes, then you have another Department of Public Works, which is led by a licensed engineer, civil engineer. I'm wondering if that's not a duplication of services, and that the civil engineer that's in the Department of Public Works could not be used as a additional duty to serve the Planning Commission on reviewing of plans and that nature, and eliminate that extra engineering position there.
Okay. We'll take a look at that.
On page 12, why in paragraph 2 under 7.09 is the exception of the amount appropriated for schools? What does that statement mean in that paragraph?
Tim Dodd, where are you? You want to answer that?
Paragraph 2, that's 7.09.
That's correct. Page 12.
Just give me a chance to read that. We'll try. I tell you what, I'm going to have to give me a few minutes, and I'll get together with you personally after this, or in a few minutes, and see if I can't determine what that was for right there, okay?
Suggestion, Tim, is that, no, sorry.
I'm just suggesting this, I wasn't on that committee, but is that not because a lot of that amount is actually state money? And you can't make it all add up because you've got all those state appropriations involved in the school budget? Okay.
One other comment on page 21, section 1804, concerning the elected officials receiving compensation in Maury County, City of Columbia, will continue to receive the same compensation. I assume that's probably a legal obligation in regard to most of these, but in regard to your constitutional offices, all of those offices' duties are going to remain the same pretty much under Metro.
Yes.
With the exception of the sheriff's office.
That is
And
correct.
the sheriff is going to take on a lot of additional duties at that time. Does this also limit his salary to no more than he's making now?
No, sir, he can make more, but that's up to the council.
Yeah.
Got a minimum salary.
It doesn't state that it's a minimum.
I want to let Ashley Brown answer that.
There is a state law that provides that all the constitutional offices, including the county legislative body and the mayor, which are also in that group, have minimum salaries.
Anything else?
There's a minimum salary based on the number of people in the counties that the offices must be paid. It's mandatory. Now, they can get more than that if each one of the commissions want to give more. But the minimum salary is already established for those, and the sheriff must get that. Now, if the commission, which in Maury County, I think the sheriff gets an addition amount for being over the workhouse. He did when I was there, about $3,000 or something like that for managing the workhouse. He could also, or she could also get an additional amount for taking on the responsibility of the City of Columbia. But that would be up to the council at the time that Metro government was brought into existence, should it be brought into existence. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, Don Morrow, I certainly appreciate the hard work that you gentlemen and ladies have put together and trying to get this charter together. My question, Mr. Chairman, is about services for fire protection. Let's say Santa Fe wants fire protection. Is that going to include upgraded water lines and fire protection for fire plugs, for example, or are they just going to have a full-time, full-staff fire truck, in that vicinity?
That's a good question, and that gets back to that special service district that we've talked about. What would happen is the council would meet with that area and share with them, if you want to have a full fire-fledged department, then we're going to have to upgrade water lines, et cetera, and thus build an approximate budget to be able to do that. And if those folks want that service, then fine, they will be assessed for that as a special tax district, and those services would in fact be provided. But it could include all of the normal things, water lines, et cetera, or it could be just give me a 24-hour-day person here, and I realize I don't have enough water, but maybe he or she can get some of the fire put out that has occurred. That's a good question. And those are the types of things that will come up.
I have one other question about services. Let's say garbage pickup. Are you going to leave the convenience centers open for those out in the county, or are you going to provide garbage pickup for those residents? Thank you.
The garbage service for the urban service district will continue. The convenience centers will continue. Now, there is a provision that allows for, if you will, annexation of areas that are in the general service district into the urban service district. And in those cases, when that occurs, then yes, those people would receive all the benefits and services that everyone else receives in the urban service district areas. Okay.
Thank you, and I too have attended several of the meetings and appreciate all the hard work that this group has done to put this together. Some of the concerns that I had have been expressed here tonight. I have to agree with Mr. Bennett on a couple of things, that it took 10% of the voting population to get the petition in place, and I agree that we need to stay at 10%. Also, my question is, we have an election coming up for the city officials, so with the election next month, then those folks could be unseated within a year's time or shortly over that, but then would be continued to be paid that compensation for 4 years. Is that my understanding?
That is correct.
Okay. Then my next question is, we normally, the city council and the county commission, serve 4-year terms. If I read this document right, the first council that would be elected would serve 3 months shy of 6 years. That's an extremely long time. I have a real concern about that. I think 4-year terms, and I think it's great that you're looking at staggered terms. From having served on a school board that had staggered terms and having served on the county commission, there's a lot of advantage to having that staggered, because there is a potential to have a full council or commission come in at the same time, and it's a real learning curve. So I really think that's a good thing, but I do question a 6-year initial term of folks coming on. And then another question that I have, and because several of the meetings that I attended, I asked some of the same questions I want to ask now. Mr. Huffer, I believe, made a statement at the first meeting that I attended that if you're voting for the metro government to save taxes or save dollars, it's not going to do that. And I just want to know if that's changed, or have we seen that we're going to see a significant change or savings?
At this point, we're still trying to resolve those issues about how much is going to be saved. Obviously, we're going from 29 elected officials in Maury County and the city of Columbia down to 11. We're not having any constables anymore. We've reduced the city judge. Having said that, does that reduce the amount? That's really going to be part of the responsibility of the new Metro Council. We were unable to get the city to allow us to be able to look at their staffing situations. I felt that when it comes to, in terms of general terms, Commissioner, I would say that you probably are not going to see a major reduction in cost. But that partly is based on the new Metro Council taking some very heavy stands about how they want to see the government function. And most importantly, that the voters hold you as a commissioner or as a council member to what they are attempting to see done in their government. Yes, it would be ideal if we could, in fact, say that we're going to save 3 or 4 cents on the tax duplicate. But that would be, I think, a little bit unfair to make that statement, because we haven't had that ability to be able to look at positions. And quite honestly, none of the 15 of us have had experience in dealing with staffing situations. And quite honestly, if we were going to get into that, the cost to do that would be astronomical, and we only had $25,000 to work with, and we weren't able to actually begin that. But we can show that there is some savings But at the end of the day, I'm not sure that, I would feel very uncomfortable saying that we're going to save you a great deal of money. No,
Okay, and-
that would be unfair.
And I appreciate that and appreciate your honesty. Another thing that I would have to say that I agreed with Mr. Bennett in, that if indeed this stays in place as it is and is voted in, and the new Metro Council comes in for 6 years, I think there needs to be something in here about recall, because if folks get into this and there is strong concern, I think there needs to be something in this
Okay.
document for them, and I appreciate that. Now, when we talked about the constitutional offices, there was no mention of the highway superintendent, and I did read in here at some point that it's being dissolved, so that is an office that's also being done away with. What is the proposal for that? Because his
Well,
office is up for election as well.
Okay, if you look on page, let me put these sheets on. I've got them running out my ears here. We've addressed that, Commissioner, under
I did see it
Page
somewhere
7.
initially, but I didn't see it tonight.
under page 7, Department of Public Works, the existing road superintendent, and I'm quoting now, will be the initial supervisor of the Streets and Roads Division of the Department of Public Works. Now, what about his employees? Quite honestly, there is no way that we could function as a metro government without the existing employees. So I don't see any of those employees being laid off. Because right now, the City of Columbia's employees are up to their throats in dealing with road issues. And over time, I would expect that there will probably be more emphasis. You know, our current road superintendent has done a great job of getting these streets paved. I think he's raised the level of quality of our roads. And I believe very strongly that part of that department will include keeping all the folks that are there now, and as we continue to grow, additional ones would be added.
All right, thank you. And one last thing. It's something that I have addressed a couple of times at some of the meetings that I have, and I know that Roger Gillum isn't here tonight, and he did address that at one of the meetings here at Columbia State, was a concern that if Metro Charter passes and we go into a new form of government, and 6 months down the road, 99% of the people in Maury County are very dissatisfied. There's no provision to do away with this, and it was my understanding that it couldn't go back to a referendum, that it would just be to amend this. So I know he had been looking into that. There was one of the 3 Metro Charter groups in Tennessee were unhappy with that. That's what they found from the state. They couldn't get out from under it. He also talked about Lafayette County in Louisiana, I believe, if I remember correctly. They had voted it in, were very unhappy, were fighting with the state down there in order to try and dissolve that. So I just wondered if you all had had any further discussion, and if there was any way to add a provision into here so that if the residents, the citizens of Maury County, were unhappy, that they would have a choice or an alternative.
I know that Roger's been working on that. Roger couldn't be here this evening, but we are looking at that. And before the end of this process, we will be able to answer that question.
I appreciate it.
We don't have an exact provision for that, but I think it's actually fairly clear that it would be not too difficult to simply write up a charter that reestablishes what we have now and offer it as a charter amendment. Now, it would still technically be a metro government, but you could provide for separate legislative bodies for urban functions and general service district functions. You could essentially recreate what we have. it wouldn't be a particularly difficult legal procedure, but you'd have to do it by referendum.
Right. But keep in mind, as I said at the very, very beginning of this conversation this evening, that we're creatures of the state. And if this is an excellent issue that the commissioner brings up, that there can be legislation passed that not only would affect this charter, but all existing charters. And I would think that would be the forum, if we're not able to find some way to do it internally, is to have the under 7-1-101 add a section that says if public is dissatisfied for whatever reasons, then here's the process that you go through, and address it from that point of view. Let me mention one other thing, because I guess the chairman left. One of the things right out of the box, and we sat down with the folks, the mayor from Mount Pleasant and the mayor from Spring Hill, and we shared with them our concern that if they are not part of this process, and this does pass, then the existing corporate limits of both those cities becomes the final ability for that city or those two cities to grow. One of the things, a resolution that I have prepared that will be part of our cover letter to the county clerk on December 8th, is that right now all 400 plus cities across the state have to, under 1101, submit a 10-year growth plan. And while we talked to Senator Ketron and we talked to Representative Butt, the timing was such that we were not able to recommend that they amend 7-101 to include the opportunity for a charter commission to recognize that 10-year growth plan as the maximum corporate limits of those areas that might be involved, in this case, Mount Pleasant and Spring Hill. So even though we didn't address it, we do say in there that if it does pass, then we would expect Representative Butt and the state senator to introduce legislation that would in fact allow for us to recognize Spring Hill's 10-year growth plan and Mount Pleasant's 10-year growth plan. So you will see that in the final documents. Mrs. Beckham, I think you had a question you wanted to ask.
You know, what I am very concerned about is that everyone in Maury County who will be voting on this take this very, very seriously, because it's kind of like getting married. It's easy and all to do that, but undoing it, I wouldn't want it to be presented as it has been here tonight, that we can just make a few amendments or do a few changes. It's not going to be that easy. And so I don't want people to go down that road thinking that it'll be an easy thing to undo. It will not be. In fact, most people that have tried it have found it impossible. And as far as the taxes being cheaper because of this, all you have to do is look north to Metro Nashville. They are the highest taxed district in the state of Tennessee. And I was a little surprised. I thought maybe Memphis would be higher, but it's not. One thing that I noticed, and I have not heard it addressed, our largest asset that Maury County government owns is Maury Medical Center. Mm-hmm. We do the borrowing for them at our tax rate. I know they have a board that sits over their business that they conduct out there, but that is a county-owned hospital. Correct. And that has not been addressed in any thing that I have seen or heard at any of the meetings, and it's not in this document that I found.
It is addressed under authorities, in which I enumerated the various boards and commissions and so forth, and if it would satisfy you, we would be happy to include making a specific mention of the hospital
Okay, and my last question is, if this were to pass, and if later Mount Pleasant were to decide that they were going to vote and they come into Metro, their infrastructure is, and I know that the indebtedness at the point that somebody comes in, they take care of that's in the past, but their infrastructure is, I don't know how to put it in a nice way, it's years and years and years and years behind, and they have lots of problems which everybody's familiar with. At that point in time, going forward, their infrastructure would become part, of Metro government, and those are the concerns that I think people should look at and maybe have addressed, somewhere, because that will become part of Metro government if they choose to come in.
Okay. Can I borrow you? Oh, you got it? Okay, sorry.
I was almost finished. Commissioner Beckham, you have to remember that it's not up to Mount Pleasant whether they become part of this. It will be up to the metropolitan government and the people that it represents. So if they decide they want to allow Mount Pleasant into it legally, that has to be done by an appendix to the charter, annexation, which has to be approved by the metro government. It can be done either by annexing the urban services area to include Mount Pleasant or to create a special services district for Mount Pleasant. But the law is fairly clear that whatever debt is associated with maintaining their infrastructure, their existing outstanding debt will remain with that special services district, and their tax to service that debt load will still be Mount Pleasant. So, I mean, and I've researched this one because that question gets asked a lot. If Mount Pleasant decides, we have all these problems, we're just going to fold into the metro government and let them inherit our problems, and then we'll see it doesn't work that way. They would still be in the same boat that they are right now, but being administered under the metro government, and it's up to them whether they want it in or not.
What the indebtedness they have when they come in was not my question. It was their infrastructure expenses going forward.
And that would be determined by the tax rate for that part of the urban services area or the special services district, similar to Culleoka or Santa Fe decides I want a
Fire station.
A fire station or fire service. You can have that, but you have to pay for it. Mount Pleasant wants to come in. If the Metro Council decides that they will come in by adopting an appendix to the charter, then they will, but they still have to pay for not only their existing debt, but the cost of anything in the future. It's still taxed to those people. And that makes any sense.
Okay. This lady back here.
Neil Blair, I just have a quick question. In my understanding, the way this thing's going to work, somebody in Mount Pleasant or somebody, I'm talking about a house owner, property owner, will still pay property taxes to this metro government. Am I correct?
You're correct.
They'll be paying the same amount of taxes they're paying now, even though, or it should be in roughly, I don't know how they'll determine, but they will still be paying property taxes as they are now to the metro instead of to Maury County.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
The lady back there in black.
Hi, I just have a few questions as well. Right now, if you lived outside of, let's say, Columbia city limits, would your tax rate change? I'm assuming Columbia has an added city tax as well as a county tax?
What would happen is that the corporate limits currently of the city of Columbia become the urban service district. Everything outside of that is under the general services district. And that's a separate line item budget matter. You're not going to be picking up any costs that should be attributed to the urban service district and vice versa. So and that will be set by the Metro Council, what the property taxes are going to be for the general services district.
Okay, another question I have. I know there's been some talk about certain cities that could default in the future or go bankrupt in the future, and the county currently would be responsible for that city. How would that work in Metro if a city did go bankrupt outside of our Metro government?
So that I understand the question, if one of the two cities that are not part of this charter were to go bankrupt, then what impact does that have on the Metro government? Is that basically the question?
I thought that currently the county would have to assume responsibility for that.
No, that's not true. If a municipality, it's just a municipal corporation that's established under state law to provide services to a city that's elected it, if they went bankrupt, it affects them and them only. You know, the county in which it happens to be located does not inherit that. The adjoining cities don't inherit it. And so that really is no different with Metro than without Metro.
Okay.
You know, every city and county government have to stand on their own 2 feet, and if they make bad choices and bad things happen and they can't meet their obligations, then that's primarily their problem and a situation between themselves and the state of Tennessee, because then the state will have to decide what's going to happen.
Okay, one other question. You said that you did collaborate with some other areas that started a Metro government, and I wondered if you inquired about intended or unintended consequences after they've been in this government for a while.
I'm going to let Randy answer that because, bless his heart, the first night we met, his comment was unintended consequences.
Yeah, my doctrine of unintended consequences, which I kind of live by, and I see it when I'm practicing law. You have to be careful when any time that you're making changes that you think are good, you have these things you didn't anticipate. You know, we've looked at Nashville, we've looked at the other two metro areas. Unfortunately, none of those are really as comparable to Columbia as we'd like to as far as track record. And that's why we kind of laugh, because every meeting, every time we considered something, I was always the one to say, wait a minute, let's consider the consequences or possibly the unintended consequences. Did we do a perfect job at that? No, because we weren't, you know. But that was an overriding concern throughout, and that's why we tried to talk to city people, county people. As Bill mentioned, I mean, we're not neither city or county government. We're just a group of 15 people that live here, with all bringing different expertises to it, which has been valuable. Banking and insurance and farming, and you know, and by us working together, I think we've covered as many unintended consequences as possible. But it's, you know, even the Constitution itself had to be amended a few times because it wasn't perfect. And the key was that you allow enough flexibility in the charter to fix things that need to be fixed, and to accomplish things that you'd like to accomplish. And that, and a lot all depends on who we elect to this, back to our taxes. Will they go up, will they go down? It depends on who we elect. Same thing as if we don't go metro. Are taxes going to go up or go down? Well, it depends on who we elect and what they do. We ultimately have control over that through the electoral process.
Okay, and I have a couple more questions, and I don't want to hog the mic, but it's just I've been to a couple of meetings, and we went through some questions and things. And a while ago, I believe you said that, for instance, Mount Pleasant chose that they wanted to come in if the charter passed, and then 6 months or a year down the road, Mount Pleasant says, we want to be a part of that. What was said earlier was that they could not be denied. That's not what I heard a while ago. So
Oh,
are
they
you
can
saying
be.
the council can vote not to let them come into the charter?
Yes. Yes, if they don't come in now, it is not their option at a later date. They can ask. The Metropolitan Council would have to amend its own charter, which would require a petition or a referendum to adopt an appendix to the charter dealing with non-primary cities, be it Mount Pleasant or the Maury County side of Spring Hill. You know, they can't just elect in.
Okay, and I may have misunderstood that initially, but that was one of my questions way back months ago. Another thing, if there's a service that's going to be provided, and there's going to be a fee assessed for that service to the taxpayers, at one time there was a discussion that you all could take up to 365 days before that service was provided from the time the fee was assessed. Is that still, and again, I've read this document and I'm not sure, I may have just overlooked it. Is that something that's in here, and is that still a part of the process?
That was taken out.
Okay, so with that being taken out, does that mean that if there is a service going to be provided, there would be no fee assessed until the service was, I mean, there's got to be money that's built for that service, so I'm wondering why that was taken out, and if there's intent maybe to put that back in at some point?
It was taken out because state law already adequately provided for what happens if you annex an area. You have certain amount of time that you have to provide the services to it. And of course, if you annex it, then you start collecting taxes. Well, you have to, in order to annex, there's a state procedure for that. You have to adopt a plan of services, which includes when are you going to be able to provide the services, at what price, at what time. And we didn't want, and we ran into this several times, we didn't want to create something locally that conflicted with state law that already governed the same thing for every other county or metro.
So does state law control metro government? I mean,
Yes.
you've said that state
State law controls all county government, county, municipalities. They are creatures of state law. The county government's created by state law, the city government's created by state law, metro government's an alternative form of government created by state law. And things, and Mr. Bennett's comment, you know, and I didn't want to say that we just didn't cover it, but there is a fairly comprehensive state provision to provide uniformity amongst all local governments for removal and ouster. And so that process is there. We just didn't adopt a different process than what's already provided for under state law.
I may have missed this, but the urban area will have an ad valorem tax that's in addition to the other tax, county tax. Are there provisions for is the urban boundaries fixed?
Yes.
Or can they also grow eventually, or?
Initially, they're fixed. Can they grow? Yes.
And they'll grow in accordance with the 10-year
Yes.
state requirement? Okay.
Annexation of the urban growth area, just exactly like you annex the city limits.
Okay. Second question. When discussing pros and cons of the school board, since the school board members are elected officials, was any consideration given to their having taxing authority as happens in certain counties, or continue on the present system that we have today? I know I read that it's going to still be subject to the commission or the council, but was
You want
any
me to answer that
discussion
one, too?
about giving them separate taxing authority?
State law does not, we actually discussed that at length and did some research. State law does not allow us to do that in the metropolitan government. The counties that do have private acts that have been awarded to them by the legislature saying you can create a special school district, a city school district, et cetera, and with these differing taxing mechanisms, because to be quite honest, I was one of the ones wanting to go down that road and maybe segregate and let the people vote separately on you know, if there's a property tax increase related to school. But without a special act amending, we're governed by what it says metros can do, and we couldn't do that.
The one thing I would add to your comment, that you as a property owner will see on your tax duplicate a breakdown of that money that you're paying in to the school system and to the general services area. So that'll help you. I think none of us have quite, well, maybe some of you have, but I have not seen that, and that might be helpful for all of us to.
I've seen it. It's real nice, and it actually has a little graph, shows the pie and how much of your money is going here, and how much is going there, and how much is going here. You know, information that's available anyway, but it's nice to see it on your invoice.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
One question. On Article 14, you were talking about the special design of that. Could somebody expand on that a little bit? What's going to be enhanced or different about the way we'll proceed?
Let's see, which one is it?
Refresh my memory. What's Article 14?
It's economic development.
Oh.
Because, Bill, you were saying it was just special because you didn't see that a lot in a lot of charters. Is that right?
That is correct. And I think it was, you know, I'm going to give Brandon credit for raising that issue, because quite honestly, we were steaming in another direction. But it was one of those kind of aha moments that we said, wait a minute, that is really critical for this government to understand its relationship to those other organizations, Maury Alliance, the Industrial Development Board, Trent's Corporation. All of that is extremely important, and the fact that the Metro Council is going to have to approve it, now we've got some real marching orders of what is going to be expected. And of the charters I looked at, that was not there. So I give Brandon and Maury Alliance credit for coming up with that. Because the other thing is, one of the things we're finding is that when businesses want to come to your community, they don't want to have to go through a city council and then turn right around and go through a county council. What they're looking for is a fairly streamlined process. And I think this provision of this charter gives us that ability to say, look, we've got our act together. Here's the man you need to go see. He'll run you through the process in 30 days and you're out. I'm being a little facetious, but that was really important. And I think when businesses understand that, they may say, well, wait a minute, this community's really got its act together, or this county's got its act together. Maybe we need to look here rather than going somewhere else in Tennessee. At least I'd like to hope that would be it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we thank you very much for being here this evening. We're going to do 2 more of these in this building on November 1st at 6 o'clock and November the 14th. Brandon, I'll now turn it back to you.
That's it. Thank you so much, Chairman Gettner and Randy Hardison, for your time. And thank you for coming tonight. It was a good evening. Appreciate it.